Freedom and long-lost love. Those were the topics of my last project. You know, as a host of Dakota Life, telling stories takes me to some pretty interesting places. But this story took me somewhere incredible. It all started when I was asked to paint a picture for the Badger Clark Foundation. For those of you that don't know him, Badger Clark was the original cowboy poet. He was South Dakota's first poet laureate, and today, he's not only in the Cowboy Hall of Fame, but his cabin in Custer State Park is a historic landmark, and his work has inspired all sorts of artists, from Bob Dylan to Bob Christensen, here in Sioux Falls, founding member of the Badger Clark Foundation.
I was a freshman at the University of South Dakota in 1968. Our literature teacher said, why don't you go over to Ida Weeks Library and see if you can find a South Dakota poet. I ran into Badger Clark's poetry, Sun and Saddle Leather. I started to read it and I thought, this guy's really cool. He talks about freedom and an open mind and tolerance and all that. And I thought, shoot, this guy's the first hippie in South Dakota.
You don't often hear the words cowboy and hippie used to describe the same person, but maybe they should. Now, instead of painting a portrait of the poet, I asked Bob what were the themes of the work that should represent the man.
This freedom of thought, freedom of movement. And I think many of his poems reflect and talk about in different ways his lost love, Helen Fowler. He had a high school girlfriend in Deadwood, South Dakota.
He and Helen would get engaged 2 separate times, but her parents said they weren't going to let their daughter marry this free-spirited cowboy. Heartbroken and diagnosed with tuberculosis, he was told that the dry air of the Southwest would be better for his health, so he took off, found a cowboy job in the backcountry, and started writing.
And I think that in many of his poems, he talks about crossing the river to you and riding the plains to get to you.
To me, he sums it up in his poem, The Free Wind, where he talks about the uncut sod and prairie flowers, camping in the valley trees, for love lived there among the honeybees, where the twilight lanes were cool and dim, and the orchards pink with May. But the wind, the wild free wind, she calls from the web love spun. And he looked back twice to his valley lass, then set his spurs and sung, because his horse and him were young. In my mind I could see this scene, Badger and his horse, the valley trees, the bees, the sky pink with May, and for his valley lass, Helen Fowler, forget-me-nots, the symbol of true love and remembrance. But I asked myself, where was the place? Where was he sitting? I asked everyone, from park staff to Badger Clark enthusiasts, but it was Friends of SDPB staff member, avid hiker, biker, and Black Hills enthusiast, Brittany Nealis, who suggested this place. Not too far from the Badger Hole, where I can guarantee this man spent time and saw this view for himself. Sure enough, when I arrived, this entire valley along the creek was filled with forget-me-nots. I started the painting, and before I knew it, it was time for Badger Stock.
They were talking about the 50th year anniversary of Woodstock. So we came up with the idea, why don't we have a spin-off, Badger Stock, and invite poets and celebrate with musicians, poets, and food and all that.
We raffled off the painting, and of course, all proceeds went to the Badger Clark Foundation.
Good luck!
And luckily, it found its way to just the right person.
Lori, here neighbor, won it, and she just leaped with joy. she got it. You got to get that picture.
She got my hair flying in the air.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you. I'm so pleased.
What's amazing to me is how this artist, Badger Clark, despite his solitude out in the desert or up in the mountains, was able to use his craft to conjure these universal emotions and connect to others through time and space and even lifestyles, from cowboys to hippies to me, using his words to pull on heartstrings and pull people together to this day. So, cheers to you, Badger. We'll see you down the trail.